the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity, tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Victimhood, ladies and gentlemen, is powerful. It bestows status. It bestows, can be used as an excuse, right? And so much so that people will make things up to be a victim. Jussie Smollett, he showed us an example of that recently, and there's been a recent abduction or fake abduction case. And in this case, we see the various uses for the victim narrative, which can bestow status, can be used as an excuse, can be used as a grand explanation, can make you feel good, and you can get caught up in it. So much so that people will make up fake victimizers. What if you had a ready excuse, a ready set of victimizer right next door that you can always pick on, right? It's psychologically very tempting to do that, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about these kinds of things as you come in through the chat. Make sure you click that like button. This is Case Closed. Highest quality conversation, highest level conversations on the most relevant topics, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. And let me just go ahead and start this way. Kaizo, I'm going to assert, right, that the Black community needs more classism. Okay. Well, who am I to say that? We can put that aside. I'm going to make the assertion. You tell me what you think about it. Needs more classism. It needs more elitism. It needs more hierarchy. Personally, it makes sense that I would say that. I would say that about anything. It's probably my highest value is the need for a clear hierarchy of values to begin with and clear demarcation between these things. The time I get emotionally exercised and activated, which I rarely do, but it'll be about calling people BANs with regards to them trampling upon whatever standards they are. So there are standards, whether you meet them or not, or whether it's fair, blah, 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 has nothing to do with anything. The things you cannot control, there's standards that are external from you, and those things should be upheld as the highest, as opposed to a notion of egalitarianism and how about the lowest common denominator defining whom one is. So I would put that to you, Kaizo, that the Black community needs more classism, elitism, and this egalitarian ethos is feminine. And speaking to Black men, I'll put the challenge this way too. Are Black men too feminine and egalitarian? What do you have to say about Kaizo? Let the African squad begin with the attack and see if we can survive this here.
You know, the Black men actually fought for access to white peace leave. Right. So I actually think the Black man's agenda is already in the wrong place. Right. That says everything. Right. It's like, if you're going to fight so hard for your rights, when I was younger and I used to watch these videos, like, Black men weren't allowed to have white peace leave. I was like, yeah, that's wrong. Then I thought about it and I was like, instead of fixing a community, instead of going and marrying Keisha, you really want to play field, pun intended, on Master's daughter. So, right. So that already says everything, like, right. Okay. The point is,
that says everything, and you're going to go with the point and hopefully answer the question with regards to classism and elitism when you're done with your show.
Right. The echelon of black society should have never allowed that to happen, because there should have been a class distinction, right? That should have been the farm boy who wanted that. But instead, what happened is, right, if you read Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks book, right, it shows that what happened is bottom white culture permeated into black society and became the norm in a lot of areas in black community. Meaning, right, basically, instead of there being a demarcation between the low class black community and the high class elite black community, it, because of obviously the idea that you are a minority in America, everybody became black, as opposed to demarcating the distinctions clearly. So to answer your question clearly, Ike, yes, unfortunately, the black community is, first of all, non-existent. Two, there's no demarcations of the warrior class, right? If you come to East Africa, right, even within a dusty tribe, there's a warrior class, and they have certain privileges that the rest don't have. And there is, unfortunately, there's always this need for bringing the whole community up, instead of saying, hey, look, that's low class behavior. Let's leave that back in the trenches.
Okay, very well put there. Okay, LAR. Okay, this is not the first time we said this in this conversation regarding the black man's need to bring along, you know, the lower class, or to be saddled somehow with their burdens. Now, it's not about whom might externally saddle you with that stereotype and say you guys are all the lowest class, but there tends to be a tendency within the black community to speak on these things on the lower class as though like they're part of your identity. If I don't correct the record with regards to these people, if I don't point to these people, if I don't say stuff about these people, somehow I'm going to be tarnished. Meanwhile, one would say that a more classist approach, a more elitist approach will be needed, which says those people are not even part of me. My culture is represented by the highest standards, as is the case with any other culture. It's not the lowest common denominator. Kaiser give us some kind of historical thing there regarding, oh, this is how it came to be. It just came to be that this kind of standard was kind of now the general standard. But what do you say to the question, LAR? More elitism is what is needed, less egalitarianism, and less feminine behavior.
Okay, we going down this road today. I see.
Yeah.
You know what? Okay, I'm game for the violence today. We need less projection. That's what we need. We already have classism. What do you think the Talented Tenth and the Jack and Jill and all that stuff has been about? Classism. It's always been there.
But it's
been there.
bad. It's seen as bad. It's like
Well,
your boule or all these other words they use. It's
no.
kind of like, oh, you're not a real, all that stuff. It's like, it's always outside. Go ahead.
What's bad is the American form of classism is basically nepotism. That has nothing to do with skill and ability at this point. That's the issue with classism, because even people who want to ascend to be upper class, that doesn't mean when you get to the upper class, you actually have people to work with. You have people with money. You don't have. Once we get to a certain point, it's all nepotism, kind of a good old boy system. That's what people have an issue with, because now you just put a bunch of people at the quote unquote top who are not actually able to maintain being at the top. So it becomes an issue. And, you know, since we violent today, since black men wanted peace leave, that shouldn't come from a guy who's a hypocritical racial peace leave chaser. You know, East Africa is full of warriors. I'm sorry, but the world does not recognize Africa as a whole continent as a warrior nation. Like, with 1 billion people, with 1 billion plus people whipping Africans up and down Africa, from countries that got 1 million people or a couple of million people to, you know, a couple of hundred versus a couple of 100 million people. That's cold-blooded. So we gotta be realistic with the projection. That's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, I get it. Do people need classes? I get it. But look at America as America is. Does the upper class in America that is not black, are they actually the most skilled individuals?
LAR. Very, very well responded, by the way, and good Good. Yeah, you guys are tit for tat. Great. Or sorry, Dr. Thunder, if I use that wrong. But good shots fired. Good going so far. Now, somebody mentioned in the chat, what is this elitism that I'm talking about? Basically, it just follows from a simple story. The simple story goes like this: there are many ways you can go in terms of what you need to do, right? We have these things that we need to do. We call them values, right? Like, what do we need to do? We need to prosper, whatever. And then once you choose that way, that we're going to go left, then there are people whom are better at taking us there than others. And that should be respected, and the standard should be that. The standard should not be the feelings of the lowest common denominator. In other words, hey, there's a hierarchy of values. Where do we go? And we say, hey, left is top priority. Once you choose left, it's gonna become immediately clear that people who are better than or less than capable getting to left, and that should be recognized, and that should be a standard. And it should not be this kind of egalitarian, so much concerned about the feelings of harmony amongst the people and so on and so forth. And I'm saying that the Black community needs more of that, especially Black men, because indeed that is the stoic realm within which men should be operating. So, Dr. Thunder, what are your thoughts so far? Basically, the assertion is more elitism is needed, more classism is needed, more of a recognition that you don't need your identity tied to the lowest of these, even if somebody is trying to use that to smear you, but that there is a trap in constantly looking at that as though you had to kind of justify, lift it up, or whatever. Am I making sense? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I would argue that a clearer hierarchy, I think, would be beneficial. Because although we do have a sense of hierarchy, the talented 10th, the boule stuff, all of that, and we do have so-called pookies and so-called educated lames. We have a sort of division in a sense. However, there is this sort of tangled pathology where sort of dysfunctional behavior that in other societies and cultures would be associated with, poor folks, broke folks, gangbangers and stuff like that, folks that don't have any resources. A lot of the dysfunctional behavior that they exhibit in our culture is actually exhibited by folks all the way up to millionaires and even billionaires, right? So we have the same sort of hood rat sort of mentality. If there was a way to sort of let go of that sort of dysfunction as you rise, and let go of this sort of Allen Iverson problem, where you're promoted, but you bring all of the dysfunction with you, and all of the people that are participating in that dysfunction. It's very difficult, it seems, for Black folks to let go of that, the folks in the that were with them in the beginning, even if that stuff is if those relationships are riddled with dysfunction, right? So that has been a challenge. I would argue that yes, I agree that less egalitarianism would be to the great benefit of the community, in particular benefit to men. I was just actually answering a question or response to one of my videos where a woman was claiming, actually I don't know if it was a woman, could have been a guy, but they were feminists, whatever they were. They were claiming that Black men, have been afforded the same sort of opportunities, or a certain disproportionate level of opportunity since slavery ended, more than Black women. And of course, when you actually look at the numbers, that is false. It's completely false, because stuff has been flipped upside down. And this whole egalitarian sort of approach that most Black men sort of take has been cultivated by the gynocracy. It's been cultivated by a sort of matriarchal soft tyranny where right from the beginning we're being indoctrinated and told that no matter what she does, she's never wrong.
Okay, since you bring that up, let me just do a little. Let me ask you a little, or just in the mind of the black man whom knows himself to be, shall we say, maybe a little outside of the community in regards to the value system, if indeed the value system is such that, hey, as you said, whether it be economic class wise, the same degeneracy is kind of writ large, if you will, or if you go with the whole Kaisorian narrative of that copying of the Southern redneck culture and all that kind of stuff. So you're an individual whom is an outlier. And if you're an outlier, you would know, you'll be able to perceive that, okay, in this particular sense, and my values are not necessarily, especially from a male perspective, because we're talking about black men, right? There's a
Right.
difference between what men value and what women value. It just is, right? So, and if you see that what a peak male, as I asked you the other day, values within your community is not there, but there is a strong sense, and I just want you to confirm that the what you call the gynocracy, the enemy or whatever, there is still a strong pull to somehow be, in a way, what I'm saying is, you've talked about a lot of numbers, right? In terms of like maybe 80%. Some people have to cut off 20% as their low, whatever. But you're like, oh, if I cut up this off, I'm cutting off, quote unquote, the whole community. And because of that tie to the community, there is a kind of this psychic energy being sucked. Would you agree, or would you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's why you have a number of brothers that are, the whole let it burn business. But even to the expression "let it burn," that implies that you have some sort of say or some control in the matter. You can't let something happen that you don't already have control of. So since you don't actually have control, basically the only option is to say it's burning. I need to escape. I need to go somewhere else. Perhaps if there is immediate compliance and no discussion necessary, you can take people with you, but you can't spend any time arguing with folks because they're not going to change. They're not going to do anything different anyway. So you have to get out of the burning building yourself. That's all you can do, and then you can take your resources and your expertise and give that to your family and start over. You start one family at a time. I mean, that's really the only option that you have. So I think there's another interesting question in here though, because I think that you can admit that the community's done, let it burn, escape yourself, X, Y, and Z, and still see it as a necessity to communicate, to comment on behavior that is not ideal behavior.
May I ask if that perhaps is so one way it is, okay, it's a personal necessity of a particular individual for whatever reasons. Let's just say they just happen to be a particular scientist that just loves to look at that part of it's like, okay, there's an explosion. Everybody knows that it's an explosion, but there's a particular scientist that likes to go in there and measure all the radiation that's happening at every given second and kind of like blah, blah, blah. That might be the reason why they're doing it, but that's a personal thing though, right? In other words, what will be, if you were to externalize it, the benefit one that might, if one were to justify that?
Well, I mean, at some level, parenting, teaching, master apprentice relationship, preaching, all of that will use examples. It'll say, you don't want to be this person. Here's the example of this person that you don't want to be like. Look what happens to the person that makes these kinds of decisions. You don't want to replicate that. Instead, you'd rather replicate these other examples, right? So there, so that is a common that's a common practice. That's just teaching or parenting or whatever else you want to call it. So you can yourself have escaped the gynocracy. You have decided that in your own household, it will be a patriarchy. It will be top down. It will be iron fist. I don't want to hear any lip. No egalitarianism here. You can decide that for yourself. But there are others that actually may be able to escape. Right?
So we will revisit this right from where you're saying right now. I'm going to ask Kaizo about the household question. In other words, how one should interact with the outer world for which one has limited control. However, there's also the, shall we say, there's a cost benefit analysis there. Internally, if someone is compelled to do something, perfectly fine. Externally, if we're doing a cost benefit analysis, we've talked about the possible benefit. The cost, though, I would argue, maybe there's traction there or not, is because of that emotional need for people to look at either A, the possible victimizer, or B, the community. There is a tendency to, I'm going to go focus on that scientist in the corner doing that radiation stuff, and I just kind of get lost looping in that, studying that over and over again. The scientists might just be doing their thing, and then there may be 2 or 3 people who pass by and get what the science from the benefits. But anyways, can't be necessarily quantified, but I want you to kind of think about it as we kind of go around again. Now, Dr. Thunder Kaizo. Well, anyway, shout out to Kaizo, first of all, right? He dropped a super chat. And thank you very much. It's I think that's $2. That's $2.
I think it's actually no. Let me tell you what it is.
Inflation here is high.
Know what this actually is. It is $1.41.
So it says black men only send super chat against Keisha. Well, shout out to you. $1 and a few cents. Okay, well,
$1.41. Let's be precise now.
41 cents, $1.41. Let's give the man all his credit. So Kaizo, you heard what Dr. Thunder said regarding your household. So the question now is this: okay, men, I'm going to put in the particular abstract form. I'm going to try to concretize things, but I'm saying that generally speaking, that as a man, a culture is an afterthought. In other words, the maintenance of a culture is an afterthought of what you do in order to make things work. You're like, okay, as a man, there's an external environment that has challenges, both the weather and the animals and the maintaining of resources and keeping the enemies at bay and all that kind of stuff. The things I have to do to keep that stuff going, right? And then the culture kind of is built around that, and then it's maintained. And that if the culture is kind of going away, as a man, you should, again, the stoic attitude would be, well, I'm going to do what works. I'm going to go so far and find something that works. So something that works within your household in this particular case, as Dr. Thunder just brought us to, right? So something is working within your household. How should you relate to the external world with regards to what is not working? Now, I know me and Dr. Thunder just went into several aspects of that, but what should be the relationship, and you can broaden it out now, of black men with regards to dysfunction outside their household? Because I argue that the danger is to constantly think of yourself as being identified to this dysfunction will cause you, will put a chip on your shoulder, will be perhaps a shorthand way of saying it. Dr. Thunder, Kaizo, what are your thoughts about what I just said?
Right. So shout out to me first of all, right? So if you notice on the chat, I brought Keisha down, and that's how you do it. I tame Keisha. I get super chats from Keisha. Keisha follows me on tier and supports. That's what I mean by black men need to be doing that. First, you have
Keisha. Keisha is Juju in the chat.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Keisha is Juju. Shout out to Juju.
Shout out to Keisha.
Shout out to Keisha, right? That's how black men need to be doing it, right? Instead of complaining about Keisha, right, and the dysfunctions that Keisha brings aboard, you tell Keisha, hey, you're gonna be a second wife. Keisha says, okay, right, and then you make sure that you give Keisha everything that she wants. Anyways, I'm just joking there. So let me answer your question, right? I think to fully understand your question and actually delve deeper into it, I think there has to be a divisionist principles, right? And I know we talk about this all the time, but you have to go back to the beginning, right? Like when your daughter grows up, hey, Your daughter should be marrying Dr. Music's son. In theory, again, when you're building an abstraction here, that's how it should be, right? You can literally go through the Black manosphere. You can see all the high level people, the highest IQ people, the highest morally succinct people, and that has to be the case, right? You can't see all these patterns from the Indians, from the Jays, small hats, etc., and then you see the patterns that they exude, and then you just ignore
Let
it.
me
And
no, hold on a second. Let me throw in LAR's previous challenge into there, and I want you to incorporate it to your answer. LAR mentioned something, which saying that basically the most competent people, okay, are not what is represented in this top, right? That okay, sure, Kaizo, the sympathetic view of your position, which I'm sympathetic to, is to say that look, yes, but the standard still has to be the highest. And the people who really move this stuff, the Genghis Khans and blah, 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 are of the highest standard. And then nepotism happens. Yeah, sure, their cousins also get in here too. But if we start lowering the standard, then no one will get anywhere. Well, or I'm including LAR's kind of thing here where you're saying, oh, competence, competence, competence. And LAR just said, oh, their competence is not what is represented in the top of the hierarchy. How would you interact with that?
right, okay, so okay, it's not always about let's say, when people say elites, right? People always get fixated on economics, right? It's not about the economics alone. The elite in this case has to be a multifactorial, right? It has to be moral elitism, right? That's what, let's say, you guys actually exude over here, right? You're men that are, we can actually take on a lot of what you say. You hold on to your words. There's certain consistency I can see in you. That's it. Moral elitism. That's one. Secondly, you have to be on the grind, right? It's not about have you arrived yet, but are you someone who's working towards a path, right? So there has to be that self-improvement elitism on that. And then last model is elitism of go ahead.
I want to just maybe point out that in this elitism that you're talking about, it involves, okay, and to varying degree, for someone like me, it's 100%. In other words, it involves a, shall we say, you have to have moral disgust for the lowers. Okay, now you can go, you can be on that extreme or not. But basically, it's not just some kind of abstract thing where what is moral elitism? I write these things down. These are the values. It's like no, you have to have this separation where no, those people are not me. There's no reason why they should be me. They don't even represent me. We're not. Oh, they're not even anywhere near or related to Mount Olympus or whatever. Just wanted to add that in. Go ahead.
Right, and in this case, like, so obviously people are gonna hate on me, right? But brothers that, let's say, say, look, hey, go and use the modern times to go and create baby mamas out there, or go and have fun and do whatever you want with the peace leave. That can't be part of this whole moral elitism, right? You have to be able to say, no, that's clearly wrong, right? We can't go around saying that this is how the culture broke down. This is how the community reached where it is, but because the community is already broken, go and do that, right? Because that's double-minded man that can't actually be trusted in any case. Now, I'm not saying I don't participate in that. That's not the point I'm making. I'm saying that cannot be something that you project out there in the mainstream, because those ideas are not part of this elitism we're talking about. And I say if you do that, you do have to also be creating a society or culture, subculture, that you can stand on, right? You do actually have to create an elite class, right? And this elite class, hey, look, if the Black manosphere had a subculture of elitism, I'm sure they have small pockets somewhere. Hey, look, you can only join this if this, and this. You have to maintain this, and this. And these are the benefits of this, and that. Like an alumni, but for, you just have to create.
Can I
go
put
ahead.
a point here? Okay. So this is a good point, and I actually made the same point that Kaizo just made on Mr. Z's channel over the weekend. He had a panel. I didn't articulate it particularly well, so I put a comment. After the video was not live anymore, so folks could go check that out. But the point here is that if you are criticizing a particular aspect of dysfunction in the community, but you yourself are exploiting the loopholes of that dysfunction, that's inherently problematic. And that's not taking shots at anyone or saying that there's even a lot of folks doing that, but there are those that are doing that, and this sort of acquire skills and resources, then you can elevate above the game, as it were. So then you can still participate in the debauchery. That to me doesn't seem to be an actual solution to the problem. And then I was going to say, one of the issues that we have is because the dysfunction, there's a tangled pathology, right? So this dysfunction of the lower class is practiced and even celebrated by almost everyone, and there are, and then you have this sort of sister code, right, where no matter if the woman is married, she's got kids, she's only ever been with one dude, she dresses modest, she goes to church on Sundays, she's still won't speak out assertively against somebody that is basically wearing no clothes, that's got 5 different baby daddies like this. So there is this need for folks in our community to co-sign bogus behavior as a signal that we're authentic,
Keeping it real.
Right, keeping it real, really black like this. So I would argue that is one of the reasons why, for us, more than folks from other communities, why it's critically important for folks to not just say I'm separating myself, but to say I'm separating myself plus this behavior is not appropriate. And there has to be a line drawn in the sand to say this is not appropriate behavior. It can't just be I'm going to separate myself from it. It's got to be I'm separating myself, but then also this is not appropriate. It's more is expected because of the history of dysfunction.
Very well put, very well emphasized there. We're going to get to LAR next. We're going to get to LAR next with this idea of what should be the relationship between you as a black man within your household. What's the relationship between you and the dysfunction that you see outside your household? How much responsibility should you take for that? How much, shall you say, should you identify with it? Because if you take the other crazy extreme, crazy Dr. Umar and his BS, it's all that nonsense about, it's your responsibility. You should see yourself about all that shit, right? So anyways, shout out to Dottie Galdem and shout out to John Zola. Thank you. And thank you, John Zola says with the super sticker, $9.99. Dottie Galdem always hitting us with the $5 super stickers all the time. Thank you.
£5. That's like $650.
Great. Yeah, so it's no shame in your game. You're not ashamed to give $1.49 while giving praise to a lady over there that gives more than you.
Yeah, because that currency actually has value. Has some value.
Yeah, no value currency. Dusty getting taken, whole continent getting taken over by like 200 white dudes. That's. I mean, LAR. So I gave you a nice layup there, but again, the idea is you create order within your household. How much of this disorder outside of your household should you pay attention to? Should you think is part of you? Should you get drawn down by? Should you get drained by psychologically? What should be your relationship with dysfunction outside your household?
You're going to deal with it. You're going to have to deal with it as it comes. It's far more dysfunction outside of most people's households than they are in their own homes. That's like, I think we're at a point where we're being naive to. I'm just making an assumption. I'll say it this way: we're being naive, thinking that somehow success and morality is correlated in America, of all places. Dysfunction has been as successful as function in this country.
Let me challenge you 1 second, LAR, because let me I don't want to split hairs. However, I just find it interesting what you just said, in the sense that it makes sense, right? Empirically, I can look and see that, of course, there's a lot of S going on in the top. Well, what I'm going to challenge you with this is like, even to be corrupt, or like, shall I even say evil, right? Even to be evil, even to oppress people, okay? You got to do it right. In other words, if you're going to make swords and kill your neighbors, you got to make good swords, right? So it is the case that even with corruption and so on and so forth, there is a machine that works well to do it, right? And whether those people have been corrupted, like, oh, military industrial complex corrupt, blah blah blah, there's still standards, okay, where the rubber meets the road, if you will, right, where things have to be done right. That tire with that rubber hitting that road actually has to be good tires, regardless of whether you're going to save grannies with the car or you're going to go kill grannies with the car. Just a comment. You can continue.
The system doesn't necessarily have to have the best tools. It just has to have people who are accomplices. If you get a see, you can have 100 good tools, but it won't beat 100,000 good accomplices. That's the issue that with that, like, even with the elitism, kind of like, I can make the argument that Africa has a patriarchy and elitism, and it doesn't work. For what in various countries on the continent, people will say they're the cream of the crop, the smartest, that this, that, and the third. How come the country doesn't benefit from that? It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. So yeah, when you go outside, you're going to have to deal with a lot of dysfunction, because ultimately America is a what? Capitalistic society. And guess what's profitable? Dysfunction. Guess what profited this country? Dysfunction. Guess what made a bunch of people rich? Dysfunction. My misunderstanding with the thing about dysfunction is, unfortunately, we look at poor people as dysfunctional as if rich people are not.
Yeah, but
Like a functional addict versus non-functional. But I was go ahead, Dr. Thunder. Go ahead.
Yeah. I agree that so another way to put this is, for all have sinned, right, and fallen short, right? So everybody has their dirt and their garbage. Now I know you're specifically relating to aptitude. You're relating this to aptitude, right? You're saying everybody is inept, basically. It's, basically there's a bunch of folks that have profited that they don't really have any particular skill set. They're just basically exploiting a system. They figured out how to do that, and that's how they're basically getting over. So I agree with that. Essentially, I agree with that. However, I would say that when you say dysfunction of folks that are, we'll say, in an elite class versus dysfunction of people that are poor, or the sort of dysfunction that I'm talking about with the sort of tangled pathology with the Black community, we're kind of talking about different things. Because one of them, we're talking about certain behaviors, sort of low budget behaviors. And the other thing that you're talking about is basically finding ways to exploit other folks as a way to benefit oneself, even if they don't actually or didn't create the intellectual property that they're exploiting. Now, I would agree with that. There's a show on HBO that I've been watching, and I'm about halfway through season 2 right now, or maybe close to the end of season 2, closer to the end of season 2 now. And that show is called Succession. Mm-hmm. And in that show, you get to see a lot of what it is that LAR is talking about. But even though that is the case, because, for instance, like they have like this management school training, but basically what it is whoever is, and it's full of nepotism, right? Basically, if you're related to what is it, Logan? If you're related to, the head honcho, then you go and you have to be a mascot at like a theme park, right? And this is like management school. They call this management school. So there's a bunch of actually kind of brainiac kids that are running around this theme park with these with these big hot suits on, it's really ridiculous. But and it's not like they've done anything of substance. They have good education because they went to the best schools and stuff like this. But a lot of them are drunks. They're getting high all the time. Matter of fact, in the first season, one of the main characters in the show, he's throwing up inside of the uniform of his suit or whatever, because because he's high when he goes to work, and then he ends up basically getting a promotion. He goes and he finds his grandfather slow walks him but hooks him up. Second season, he's in this big like penthouse, and his job is basically running around and giving people their coffee and just basically going and getting Coke and stuff like that for them. So you see both sides of this. But having said that, there is a structure that allows all of that other bogus behavior to exist while they're still actually making real moves and actually doing things that are sort of world-changing kind of things. So I don't know if you want to respond to that or not.
That's kind of my point.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not. I get that we need to keep our dysfunction to a minimum in order to progress. I get that, especially opposed to other groups. But what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, unfortunately, that might be naive, because guess what people are going to do? Put their people on, and because if I make it, we all make it. That's pretty much a thing that has been done with every group in general. There's a bunch. When we look at other groups, prime example, I'm gonna say this. I was looking at a clip of Coffee and Cars, or Cars and Coffee. If y'all don't know what that is, it's like a car show. People meet up, and this happens a lot of times. Which you wind up. Well, let me pause. Okay, I'll get right back to y'all. Hold on.
All right, you got your delivery of something. That sounded like a delivery knock.
Dysfunction, man. It's knocking on the door. Can I respond to
Go
that
ahead.
a little bit? Yeah, so I've seen Succession, and I understand what Dr. T is talking about. I'll say the main difference between us is, I would say, as Black people, we haven't reached the level whereby individualism can take hold. And I'm gonna try to relate this to, let's say, Pan-Africanism in general, and also, let's say, democracy, right? Having dysfunction, like having ordered dysfunction, is like democracy, right? You allow everyone to vote and everyone have a chance in that system. But if you want to be successful, when you are at the bottom, like, what you have to do, what China did, you have to order that dysfunction to a point whereby it's so streamlined until you reach a point of succession, pun intended. Then you can allow for, like, let's say, differences in I guess, all this chaotic stuff.
Okay, cool. So
we don't have the privilege yet.
and I'll let you continue. You say on the lowest level, this, and the ability when you're trying to rise, this particular segregation of those who are able to take us up versus those who can't is most important at that stage. That actually the hierarchy is most important when it comes to when you are at the bottom. I mentioned before that, okay, so you're a man, you're going to go create some kind of new thing that works. Afterwards, there might be an afterglow of a culture that comes after it, after generations or whatever. But in the beginning, while you're establishing this land of milk and honey, you better separate the King Davids from those who are not going to be doing anything, because you cannot afford to have laggers on. But anyways, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think we still definitely really do need to create like demarcation points and have like some general structures and like how we're going to vet ourselves in these systems, right? At the end of the day, we have to create things that are actionable. I think that's the key word, right? Create
You got some
institutions that
goat meat biryani in your mouth. All of a sudden, you can't think anymore, huh? Freaking- Make it dusty freaking ram. Depending on what religion you're practicing this week or whatever. But let's see, LAR, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Here, like,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
using what Kaizo said and what Doctor was talking about, we're making a bad assumption that even if we put people in positions to vet, they wouldn't opportunistically pick who they want. That's the problem. We keep making the assumption that people are going to do the right thing to make the whole better, and they're not.
Yep. That's a good point.
That's why I was bringing up the coffee and cars thing. Like, if you watch that enough, you've seen plenty of times where people on motorcycles and sports cars peeled off and ran from the police. And it's a predominantly white environment. And guess what happens? The white guys cheer on. Nobody gets arrested.
100%.
So guess what? Like, if we were pulling that stunt, it'll be a police chase all on the news.
I'm sure you, LAR, have done both, right? In other words, you've moved from one hood to the other hood, right? You've driven one type of car, you've driven another type of car, right? You know how you used to get pulled over before versus now, right? I always give example of myself where like, oh, back in college, driving hoopties, getting pulled over for the same shitty behavior. When I'm behind a particular kind of driving a particular kind of car in a particular zip code, still doing the same ratchet nonsense. There is no whatever. But I would add the Dr. Thunder point that in order for me to move into that neighborhood, I'm not trying to belabor this point. This is not about you, Eli. I just want to complete the story here. In order for me to move from the ratchet neighborhood into the neighborhood where I could now drive a better car, but still doing the same stuff without grief, I had to go through a lot of structure, order, discipline, competence. But anyways, go ahead.
It's not necessarily the neighborhood. It's because I've seen people race cars in bad neighborhoods and good neighborhoods that were of a certain complexion. They won't get bothered. It's a complete difference.
So just straight up racism. Okay. Well, and I'm the worst example because I wouldn't know. I look like a white dude driving in a car. So it is. Yeah. Thank God.
white power.
Indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you click that like button as you come in. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. We're talking today about being kind of abducted, captured, enslaved by the lowest common denominator in your culture. Yes, there is a history that has played itself out in all kinds of forms with regards to demonizing black men, right? So on and so forth. Now we're going to point to one of these particular demonizers, okay? I'm going to start with you, Dr. Thunder. We'll go around. One of these particular demonizers, let's say, has been Oprah. And by that, I mean her and everything that she represents. Premise number one, men and women are different. You cannot use the same tactics that Oprah used to set the record straight or to fight back and be taken seriously is the proposition. And what you think about that proposition. Men cannot, in an attempt to rectify the situation, respond like women, go tit for tat with women, or use the same means as women and still expect to be seen and respected as men. Neither will it even work, is the proposition. What do you, where am I wrong there? What do you think about that, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah. I mean, men have to use perhaps different tactics, but I would argue that some of the tactics that Oprah used were not traditionally feminine tactics, right? She, had a large platform, and she was putting out certain messaging about black men, disproportionately negative images of black men. And then obviously we know, color purple. Kevin Samuels frequently called this the color purpling of the black community, where disproportionately bad images of black men were put out there in the media.
On this image
I
front,
think
are you saying that this is not a feminine thing to do?
what I'm saying is using the apparatus to promote a particular agenda. That is not, I wouldn't call that feminine per se. I would just say that's just controlling the narrative. And everybody has to control the narrative and control their image. If damage has been done to our image, then we have to find ways to, by using empirical data, we have to find ways to clear up the discrepancy. And in order for people to be aware of this, we're going to have to use large platforms to do it. So as this sort of messaging, stuff like what Medium Man does, shout out to Medium Man, using stats and figures to dispel a lot of these bogus images and using data to dispel this. But as that sort of messaging becomes more of a common knowledge thing, then it'll start to sort of, I think, fix a lot of those bogus narratives and perceptions of black men. Now, to your point about the sort of cackling and obviously feminine aspects of what Oprah was doing, yeah, I mean that stuff is not going to help us. But I would argue that there are things that we can learn from the way that women tend to caucus and tend to support each other better than men do. Men tend to just suck it up and just take it. We expect things to be hard. We expect things to be challenging. And often is the case that we won't speak up about issues that we should probably speak up about. Okay. So I think that's something that black men can probably learn from this. And I wouldn't necessarily say that is that's a feminine or a masculine thing. That is just, I think one party just tends to do that better. Yeah. They tend to let it be known what their grievances are. For the most part, the general public doesn't have any idea of what men's grievances are. They have no idea, and that's because men don't spend any time developing, a list of grievances and language to be able to effectively communicate those grievances, right? And then you also don't have the benefit of being a woman, where men and women have been socialized to rush to the defense of women. We're not been socialized to rush to the defense of men. So you have some of these sort of things that you have to contend with in this discussion. But I wouldn't say that just because it was Oprah using certain approaches, that if some of those approaches were emulated but used in a way to paint positive narratives, that's necessarily feminine. Because I would argue that in many ways, what it was that she was doing, she was probably doing things that in many respects you could characterize as being masculine, and having a certain control of the apparatus was definitely beneficial and helpful for getting her particular messaging out.
100%. So go ahead and make a point, Kaiser. I'm just going to say two things here. Well, first of all, it is with regards to these particular attributes, right? Because I said premise number one, men and women are different. So to the degree to which they're different, especially you mentioned some attributes such as, damsel in distress trope working better for women, and that you cannot help the image question. In other words, how you come across as a man when you're playing politics and image games, right? So you have to consider that. And then you also mentioned learning this. So I would say so far I'm in agreement with what you said, in the sense that in other words, there is a way of learning what works for women and what works for men, not stepping on your dick, as they say, with regards to some of these things, even though it might be indulge in a particular way, especially when playing image games, because in order to be seen as the man that you're trying to be seen as, if you start doing certain kind of wrong things, because you get the point. But anyways, Kaizo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think the only solution for black men is to take on their misogynistic hat, right? You have to take that, right? So I've noticed in the black manosphere, there's a lot of emphasis on like actually caring about women's points of views, the fact that they've got democracy and they're fully grown humans and stuff. I think you have to take Dr. Uma's point of view and take it to the extreme toxic state, right? That means you create the society, you set the rules, standards, you listen to them, you analyze it the way men have always analyzed things, right? These elders in these tribes, these councils of elders, right? They listen to everyone and they make a decision, right? You don't go around spending time debating them or trying to convince them. You're not going to convince them. These people are not wired to the truth, right? They're wired for their feelings, emotions, and things that they value. Sometimes that aligns with you, and sometimes it doesn't. I think we are obsessed with trying to make them understand, right? And that's because we bought into postmodernism and this whole approach of communication through words, right? Yes, we men can have certain channels that the truth gets out, but let's not focus on that truth as if that truth's going to change the culture. I think the only thing that can change things is we create industry behind us, and they will follow. That's the reality. They will follow. And we don't have to worry so much about
forget forget the they will follow part, okay? Because and you know why I said that. You do it. You just do it, right? I mean, what follows is what's amenable to the order that you're trying to create based on what you are trying to create as a man, right? Whatever the hell follows is what follows with that. Who cares what it is? But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I say that the space, it should never be about, let's say, them understanding us. I think it should be what it actually is for the most part, is us building understandings of how the system is, right? The red pill should never be about Keisha, right? The red pill should be about nature, life, right? Understanding your position as a human, male, black, whatever it is, into this universe, right? So yeah, I say take on the toxic, become the most misogynist, rule, because we are the council of elders, and we build the culture around that. And yeah, what transpires after that is what's going to transpire. That let's never think Keisha will somehow understand. No, Keisha won't. Even when Keisha seems to understand, like Just Buddy thinks, it's going to be an understanding based on her emotions, nothing to do with the reality of anything, right? These are grifters, intrinsic grifters, and yeah, shout out to them.
In the words of Dr. Umar Takaizo, who is grifting in the black manosphere when it's convenient for him, don't you find that suspicious?
Uh-oh.
So LAR, you've heard what has been, so there is a question on the table, and that has to do with how you battle this thing. So let me put it in a particular way, right? Again, men and women are different. You cannot respond or react like a woman, in other words, like play shaming games, engage in jawboning and superficial relationship talk, right? And just running around like a chicken with his head cut off one day, the next day over here, over there, chasing down and pointing out, quote unquote, even corrections, right? And think that it's going to work for you as a man, or that other onlookers looking you as a man, doing that will kind of that it works for your political purposes, right? For your image purposes, right? So you kind of get what I'm saying here, right? The whole arc of color purple. Dr. Thunder gave us the arc, right? The color purple and Sally, Jesse, Raphael, all of them, right? And then, okay, now it's our turn. And it's like, okay, our turn, your turn, but how are you going to do it, right? That actually works, because it's not going to work the way the women did it. What are your thoughts about that, Eliar?
Using Oprah, but she's also as an example for failed elitism. Failed elitism. Because there are black men who've been in business who've done pretty much the same thing, where you start, you grow, you become uber successful, then you become the master of your own destiny. You own your own platform. You build that platform on dysfunction. And then when it's functional, you basically lease it out to make other non-Black people rich and wealthy, kind of like Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, Rachel Ray. And then, you know, then you go on and you build a network. And then you try to cater to the same audience that you once catered to. You make multiple people millionaires as authors that don't look like you. And then when it doesn't work on your own platform, your own network, no pun intended, you lean to make dysfunctional material to make your money back at the Black community. Thus, the Tyler Perry, the Ayanna Van Zant. And when it's all said and done, you can't think of one Black executive, one Black talk show host, one Black accountant, one Black grip that became a cameraman, that became some type of big, not even big, but known entity in the background or the forefront in that industry. That's the problem, because now I can guarantee you, the Dr. Oz's, the Rachel Rays, the Dr. Phil, they have people who work for them when their platforms grew that are still working after they're gone, that look like them. That's it, and that's the problem with elitism, you know, in our community. So that's the point of it's the failure. And yes, she's a woman who did it, but guess what? She retired and bought her a super mega mansion and got her some maids and butlers and just said F it. And guess what? That's who you can't depend on.
She ordered the royal family to move next door to her too.
Yeah.
She's like, I need new neighbors. So Dr. Thunder, right? And shout out to the chat again, ladies and gentlemen. Click that like button, share the stream. We're talking about being bonded, okay? Being in bondage by the image of the lowest common denominator, as opposed to cutting, how one may cut that off or relate to that. Dr. Thunder, I once heard you say in probably one of your Car to Thunder streams, you were talking about the idea of issues that men are having within the community. Okay. However, you were talking about some particular men who also said, but in order for me to deal with a counterpart, they're gonna need to know about Bill Cosby show and all these other kinds of things. They need to understand the right? So what is your response to that now? Because I'm saying that you got to be free to leave dysfunction and not be held on to, by it. And it's been seeming abstract, but you concretized it with something that someone supposedly said, right? What is your diagnosis of what's going on there? That you think that a superficial cultural kind of, it's not even culture, it's not even a depth of culture, like just superficial stuff like that is what's going to keep you together. That's the basis of a long-term freaking lifetime contract that's filled with all kinds of commitment and so on and so forth. What is this? Is part of it kind of fear? Part of it, what is going on there? Comfort, perhaps just too much comfort with this. This is like the perfect bed, perfectly made for you with the right porridge on the right side and the slippers just laid right. And you're just like, why go anywhere?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm changing the name of the Car Thunder series to Rolling Thunder. Thunder, which works better, especially when I have, because this whole summer I've been basically in my basement. I've been in my studio, and not in my car. So calling it Car Thunder all the time seems to be. But Rolling Thunder, obviously, there's a relationship, and then there's a relationship with the weather and stuff like that. So that it works well. So I've switched it to Rolling Thunder. But yeah, I recall this conversation that I had with a buddy of mine, and my buddy, so this is his second divorce, and I had been talking to him about, expanding his options, opening up his sort of, considering other things, and Cat grew up in church. You know, he's a great musician. And but he's kind of like, you know, the Black American woman thing. That's his jam. And then, and that's cool. That's my jam too. I get that. But at one point, you have to be like, okay, but what am I giving up for not being willing to consider other options? And it seems like Black men give up so much. You know, it's that sort of familiarity, that cultural familiarity, and even stuff like person knowing the Cosby Show, person knowing, you know, other sort of, you know, unique to Black American culture sort of events that have taken place, and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, you have to be willing to give up some of that if you're going to elevate yourself and get yourself in a situation where perhaps you won't have to sort of repeat the same mistake. You won't have to, you know, have such a limited option, a limited list of options. You know, if you consider, and I've said this frequently, if you consider a brother that makes $50,000 a year, that makes him part of the top 1% in the world of income earners. Top 1%. And America is not the only place with melanated women. It's not the only place with women of African descent. It is just not. There are other women, other places where you can find women of African descent. And if you're willing to open it wider than that, you have other places where there's melanated women. You know, so if that's the thing, and you don't necessarily have to do that. The point is that if you have resources and you've made good decisions, you don't have to just take what they're giving you. You can say, guess what? I don't like the options that I have. I'm going to go somewhere else. But when you do that, you have to recognize that there is going to be a different cultural dynamic. There is going to be a different, it is going to be different. It is going to be, and you just have to be okay with that. To, you know, to limit yourself, to refuse to, you know, be open to those options based on something as trivial as the Cosby Show. You know, familiarity with even American popular music or something. It's like, is that the stuff that really keeps, or, you know, keeps a marriage together? It keeps a relationship together, that actually develops and builds legacy? Is that the stuff that actually matters? That's playing into that whole, you know, common interests in, you know, being compatible and all this long list of things that marriage 2.0 folks are all about, that whole partnership business. But marriage 1.0 didn't really care about that stuff. It was not concerned with that. And because it actually had the stuff that was most important in focus, and prioritize those things, you could have two people that may not have even really had anything in common and may not have even started out even liking each other, but they could have a thriving marriage and build tremendous wealth and legacy. Of course, they'd learn to like each other, they'd learn to love each other, but you can develop that stuff over time. But that's just not, that superficial stuff totally jacks us up every time. But she got to have this, you know, criteria, and she got to look like this, and she got to be like this, and she got to know, you know, about all of my this stuff over here and all this abstract, you know. It's like that stuff doesn't matter. Long run, it doesn't matter.
Indeed, 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 ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to start closing up shop here, giving our closing thoughts. You see, Kaiser, you mentioned earlier the adoption of postmodernism, right? Hyper individualism. Dr. Thunder just mentioned the whole compatibility. One could even use Disney fairy tale trope as encapsulating that whole kind of thing that was consumed. Dr. Thunder, you also mentioned once that you think that perhaps the underclass tends to consume more of that stuff and kind of are moved by it, as opposed to in the upper class with things perhaps maybe more pragmatic and like, oh, marriage is not about this, business relations, that type of things, having things to protect. And it makes sense also, that escapism may be more prevalent. One may be more prone to escapism in the lower classes and whatnot. But Kaizo, what are your thoughts about that aspect? If you want to elaborate more, do you think that lower classes, for some reason, are more prone to take in these kinds of ideas? Politically, also, these types of ideas also tend to come from the left, and the left is, it's kind of like a lower class thing, and it's not a pejorative by any sense. It just means that the left is looking out for the people, generally speaking, at the bottom of the hierarchy and making sure that things are at least fair, right? Ideally, so to speak. But go ahead, Mr. Kaizo, along with your closing thoughts on everything that we've said today about elitism, classism, what's more needed, what are the values, okay, of these, and how do you relate to dysfunction outside your own household and such? But final thoughts, and we'll go around. We'll end with Dr. Thunder.
Yeah, shout out. Also, your thing was bogging a little bit, but yeah. So I think, yeah, of course, right. Culture is interesting because sometimes culture works for the elites, and someone could say, things like religion is there to control the masses, or statements like that, right? What that is more or less saying is that culture is created for the participation of the masses in a more of a blind faith aspect. Meanwhile, the elites can choose which culture to engage in and which one not to, right? They can do what the succession crowd people can do, right? They can go in and out, but they have it controlled in a way that they will still yield certain outcomes because it's actionable dysfunction anyways. So I definitely do see the element of postmodernism, how that's like affecting things. Yes, there is. I do think that certain dysfunctions in culture is promoted by the left, obviously, right? We know what they are. When I was young, right, when I went to the UK the first time, there was no such thing as LG rainbow stuff on TV at all, right? You wouldn't see it, at least not in a positive light. Within 20 years, that changed, right? Obviously, that's to do with the left pushing their agendas. So what I'm trying to say is this, right? There is obviously a globalist agenda to kind of make men in general and families not own anything. You own nothing and you will be happy, right? That is the momentum. That is momentum mori, right? Remember, you have to die, and you'll die happy without any ownership. And of course, they're using certain communities like Black community and Africans, people who they can leverage certain things. Black community, they can leverage culture. Africa, they can leverage economics. So there is a actual real boogeyman in this world, right? Bill Gates, who are trying to make sure that certain people don't have power, right? And we have to acknowledge that. So this is where the postmodernism is moving forward to, and liberal culture is definitely pushing this. Now, I don't want to sound like LAR and say it's nihilistic. There's no hope for any of this, but this is where the world is heading towards. All we can do is those of us who want to become pioneers in the next world, we definitely have to, stick to what me and Dr. Thano are talking about: moral elitism, right? Competence, elitism, and build our communities around ourselves. So that will be my closing thoughts.
Very well put there. Very well represented. So, LAR, go ahead and give us your closing thoughts. And again, you can comment on anything that we've talked about. We even asked, hey, are Black men too feminine and egalitarian in their outlook? Everybody has to be. It's more natural, this idea of elitism being a bad thing somewhat, right? Like, as in, again, I mentioned this boule and all that kind of stuff. Typically, these are pejoratives, unless I'm wrong, but I typically hear them being used as pejoratives, that you're kind of uppity. if you kind of have any kind of a standard, and that again, that standards are somehow not objective, right? That somehow a standard is either white or black, right? That thing over there is a white thing. It's like, no, it's not a white thing in the sense that it's not an English thing, German thing, whatever thing, but it's just what works. Whomever has power at the moment tends to be using what works. It's not their thing. Okay. But anyways, LAR, what are your final thoughts?
You just said something. Whoever is in power tend to do what works, right? But that's what works for them. The issue becomes you believe what works for them will work for you when they intentionally made it work for them and not you. So that's where we have an issue now. As far as the male dynamic, the world is getting softer. Well, I didn't want to say the world. America is definitely getting softer by the minute. So the interesting thing about building is going to be pretty difficult to build with a soft men. That's going to be a minority job. And bringing into the modernism part, unfortunately, I'll say it, technologically speaking, the vast majority of modern men don't want to get their hands dirty to build anything in the first place. That's what they want the computer to do. You know, so now we have the bigger issue of most communities will fall apart because most of the men will not maintain them because they don't want to get their hands dirty. So you got an individualistic society. And this is why you see people wanting to bail on America anyways, because it's falling apart faster than we want to fix it. So that's my thought.
Indeed, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, in terms of globalization, right? The global elites are not wedded to any particular geographical location, right? They're wedded to an identity, a set of values, or whomever can get the job done for them in a way that works for them, which is a part that LAR added there, in a way that works for them, right? So, for example, a victim of globalization is the American Rust Belt right now, okay? That doesn't matter that it's in America, okay? And the global elite, whether they're in New York or Dakar or France or England or Paris, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. They're still view themselves as the global controllers of capital at that level. So, Dr. Thunder, give us your closing thoughts. And you're going to start your Two Dads React show. Update us on Two Dads React, right? Because it's buddy back from holidays. And what are your final thoughts here?
Yeah. So Two Dads React will be back this coming Thursday. That's a 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time show with God Rules. Been best friends. We've been friends since 5th grade, and he's got a big platform, 500K subs, and he's that show is kind of verging on conspiracy, and we deal with a lot of kind of geopolitical stuff, and we have a lot of heat for the rainbow. So as it relates to trying to indoctrinate and proselytize kids, that's a particular issue that we have. So we've talked about that quite a bit. So yeah, come and check that out. There'll be Rolling Thunder. Will be happening tomorrow morning at around 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So come and check that out. That's been a growing program. I've had a lot of folks, folks are really supporting, and I appreciate that. So come and check that out. And, a bunch of stuff, Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder on Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think that'll be on my channel this time, I think. And then also Case Closed on Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we got lots of great stuff is happening. Make sure you sub to to Ike's channel. Make sure you, bang the bell, all of that stuff. Join the channel, support the content, all of that. Now, this is interesting, this topic, because, I wanted to reference this, something that LAR was saying about it's not likely that we'll have the same level of success, black men, with the system that was designed by the dominant society, designed in such a way intentionally, just like anybody that is tribal would do, to keep other folks out. That's black folks would do that too if they were the dominant society. So it wouldn't just be white folks that would do that. Now, there's something I think, I like to talk about this, the Pharisee, the criticism of the Pharisees in the Bible, right? One of the things I think people miss is that part of what is kind of bogus about what the Pharisees were doing is that the system that they designed intentionally prioritized their own skill set, their own strengths. And then they would disproportionately or harshly criticize others who didn't have the same benefit. Perhaps they didn't have the same pedigree, they didn't have the same training, they didn't understand the same languages to the same extent because that kind of training was not available for them, whatever you want to say. But they would harshly criticize others for not being able to get up to this bar that they were able to get up to. But it's disingenuous because the bar intentionally leaned towards their strengths, right? So the bar leans to their strengths. And the thing is that every culture does not necessarily have the same strengths, right? And it's okay to acknowledge that in certain cultures, there are areas of deficiency, and to look at other cultures and say, hey, this is an opportunity for me to grow. But we should also be maybe not rush so quickly to judge other cultures for not having certain a tradition of a strength in a particular area, so anyhow, the system of government that we have, it's not likely that black people in mass, the system that we have in mass, are going to have the same level of success as the dominant society, because the structure is designed to prioritize the strengths that they possess, right? And this sort of seeing that there is a lot of corruption, a lot of nepotism, and put your cronies in there and all like this. Well, part of that is just tribalism. But part of it, I would argue, is there are other strengths that are strong enough to be able to endure that sense of that particular deficiency. So I can give credit where credit's due. I can still say that if you're paying taxes, that you should, you should receive the same access, the same benefit as anybody else, regardless as to whatever tradition they came from. If you can do the job, you ought to get a shot at it. And so to the extent that these systems are set up and are intentionally preventing or barring access to us, not based on ability to do the job, but based on other criteria. That's where the problem lies, and so we got to fight for that. Should we be overly concerned about, as productive men, ratchet behavior? No, we should not be overly consumed by that. Is it important to actually point out dysfunctional behavior and point out the difference between that and positive behaviors? Yes, I think that's valuable, and that's part of teaching. And if there are people that are open to changing, they got to see it. They need to see what we're talking about. But I would argue that there's not that many that want to change. And so, yeah, let it burn, rescue yourself, save yourself, open your options, all of that stuff. And that's my final thoughts.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Thunder. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the conclusion of this particular episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. And today we basically asked the question, does the Black community need more elitism, more classism, in the sense that the culture should be defined by the highest as opposed to the lowest common denominator? That due to a variety of historical circumstances, the Black community tends to be saddled more with its underclass, and even also a notion that the underclass deserves a little bit more slack because of historical factors, right, that make it such. But it's a catch-22 in the sense that when you look at what it means to be functional, there is typically a very clear-cut demarcation between those that can get us there and those that cannot, for a variety of reasons. And we've kind of laid it all down. Shout out to LAR, shout out to Dr. Thunder, shout out to Kaizo, and shout out to the super chatters. I think Datigel and Kaizo definitely for the $1.41, right, Dr. Thunder? $1.41. Very much appreciated from the Dusty East African warrior class. All right. Until next time, peace.
Peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity if it hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons will breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, could either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado. Hey, word them up, 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 word them up. No weapon fashioned against the Son of Creator. No power shall threaten the higher levitator. So rising in the morning, that's my motivator. You can never separate or turn your back upon nature. My people, if you're listening, let me ask you one thing. What is the color of your desire and longing? Why do you thirst for power over more and more things? Put them up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, go enjoy your dusty afternoons. We're out. We are out indeed.